Hi everyone. So we're back with another interview with my friend Amir, who I found him on Instagram, like so many people that I find. Um, and he's just so knowledgeable about movement, and moving in a way that is healthy and leads to, you know, the most optimal health and longevity. And I thought that he would just be perfect person to have along to talk about hypermobility. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So my name's Amir Zandinejad, and I work as a strength coach or fitness coach. I'm also FRC certified. I've done FRA, Kin Stretch, FR, and some different kind of certifications and stuff like that.
Can you
And I kind of really, oh, go ahead.
um, explain what all of those things are? Because probably most people will be like,
What?
FR what?
FRC stands for Functional Range Conditioning. It's a program by Dr. Andrea Spina and the Functional Range Systems. And they also have different certifications, like the FRA, it's Functional Range Assessment, where we have a deeper understanding of how to assess a human being and their specific biology. The other one is Kin Stretch. And the way I look at Kin Stretch is more of applying these FRC concepts and principles in a group setting. And the last one was FR, Functional Range. And this is actually more for manual therapists, and I'm not a manual therapist by any means, but I was just more interested about the type of interventions they utilize in manual therapy and how it correlates to strength training. So I just kind of went there to be a student and kind of learn more than anything than rather use the information on someone physically. But all this stuff, I mean, we're just taking a deeper understanding of human biology and how it correlates to training and fitness. So I got all these certifications about 17, 18 months ago. And this is kind of like when I dug in and dived in a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole when it comes to mobility and movement.
And what about before those courses, Amir? I mean, can we give us just a little bit of insight? Because what's your practice? I know you were saying your strength training, but is that your main thing that you're doing day in, day out? And how long have you been doing that? And what kind of clients do you normally work with?
Sure, yeah. So I really got more into like mobility and movement about 3 years ago. And the reason why I got into it is actually my body was like broken. I was doing more traditional weightlifting, bodybuilding type stuff. I've been a personal trainer for about 9 years, and I just did very textbook type stuff. It's very conventional type stuff. I did powerlifting and weightlifting and all that stuff, and I did that for about 8 years. And I was losing my mobility. I was losing my movement quality. I had a lot of chronic pain, recurring injuries, and my body just felt really beat down and broken. And mentally, I was just like, you know what? Maybe I'm just getting old. Maybe this is just what's happening. But then I kind of had like this light bulb moment one day when I was kind of looking up to certain athletes that I would see on social media, like Ido Portal. I'd see Hunter Cook, and I saw what they could do with their body, and I just thought it was so fascinating. And I thought to myself, like, why can't this be me? Why can't I be capable of this? So that's really when this all started. It was about 3 years ago, and I had that light bulb moment. And I really dug in a little bit deeper and trying to understand how this is possible. How can we create this? So like the last 3 years, I've been just kind of working day in and day out and just trying to understand these concepts, these principles, and creating this change within my own body. And as far as the type of clients I work with today, I mean, it's all kinds of clients, whether they're athletes, whether they're just trying to get better movement quality and trying to get out of pain, whether it's just like the average person or someone with these type of sport specific type goals or whatever it may be. It's any kind of demographic. And then we customize their program specifically to their biology, their goals, and their needs. So it's really dependent, and I take on anyone that just is hungry to get healthy and perform better, if you will.
So, given the fact that you were almost on the opposite end of the spectrum than our hypermobile people, it's amazing to see what you're doing on Instagram right now and how you've obviously completely transformed your body. It's so inspiring. But if within your practice, are you working with any hypermobile people? And, you know, what have you learned about working with hypermobile people? What kind of insights could you share with the audience that are listening right now?
Absolutely. And I think the first thing, and hypermobility is the term that's always used. And the way I look at it is the term really should be hyperflexibility. Because if we think about mobility and what mobility truly is, it's strength training. It's being strong in these extended ranges of motion. So if you have strength and control in a range of motion, you can't ever have too much mobility. So hypermobility, it's a tricky term, because really what we're trying to say is someone's hyper flexible. They don't have strength and control in these ranges of motion. They're just able to achieve it passively. So I have this one client in particular who has the most severe hypermobility that I've ever seen. And it's just, her body allows her to go into all these ranges of motion passively, but she has no strength and control over these ranges of motion. And this poor girl, she's only 17. She barely does anything, and she'll like tear a ligament in her shoulder or tear something in her knee. Prior to seeing me, she's had 3 knee surgeries, 2 shoulder surgeries. And like I said, it's very unfortunate that when this kind of happens is you just don't have strength or stability or control over your ranges of motion. And when you kind of go in them more dynamically as life will present, injuries will happen. And that's the downside of hypermobility. Neurologically, your body trusts you to go into a range of motion, and you don't have strength and control there. And it's not going to be a favorable outcome when you do go in there when life kind of presents itself dynamically.
Yeah. So you just said one little word, neurologically, and that was one of the things one of the reasons that I wanted to get you talking on this subject, because you really take the neurological approach in a lot of what you do in your practice. And so in terms of like how the brain communicates to the rest of the body. And so I don't know, like can you just talk a little bit about like, how you would take that approach of like applying neurology to hypermobility?
Totally. And I think I should probably clarify for people, because it might be a little bit confusing at first. So when we go into a stretch, like let's say we're going into like a hamstring stretch, I flop my leg on the table and I'm going into a stretch. A lot of people are under the assumption that we're actually lengthening the muscle. And that's why we call it a stretch, because it's actually stretching the muscle. But it's actually, we're not lengthening muscles by any means. We have insertions and origins, and all the tissues that run in between that, they don't lengthen or shorten. That's not what happens on a biological level. So we actually have these things called muscle spindles. And when we go into a certain range of motion, these spindles will communicate information to our nervous system. And that's when we perceive tightness, or we may perceive pain as well. So this is your body just trying to report back communication as to where does your strength and control end. Now I'm going to put a perception of tightness so you don't go into this range of motion. Now the thing about hyperflexibility or hypermobility, your body is essentially taking away those safeguards. It doesn't have those safeguards anymore. So it just trusts you to go into a range of motion that you're not strong and controlled in. And then that's when injuries happen. And I actually just kind of went off on a little bit of a rant. What was the actual question? I totally forgot.
Just all of the work that you do in terms of like building that connection between the brain and the muscles. How would you apply that to somebody who's hypermobile?
Totally. And that's the cool thing. So when we first have to assess the certain body part or the certain joints that we're working with. So let's take the hip, for example. If we take the hip, and what we want to check is passive range of motion, and then we want to check active range of motion. So I would take someone's hip while they're laying on their back and externally rotate their hip passively and see how far I can passively push them into a range of motion. And then I would have them, exactly. And then I would have them do it completely on their own with their own leg. Yeah, how far can you actively pull your hip into external rotation? If there's a bigger discrepancy, more than like 10 to 15 degrees, this is not a good sign. Once again, these are just ranges of motion that your body neurologically will trust you to go into, but you don't have strength and control in, so that's very bad. So what we want to do is we want to minimize that gap as much as we can. So I would get them into those ranges of motion right before they cut out of that strength and control. And then we have to work more neurologically demanding active mobility drills to start strengthening those lines of tissue that are not strong yet. And then we work about 10-degree increments, increasing ranges of motion, and continuing to apply those strength training concepts to continue to strengthen and build neurological control. And that's the one thing that we do not get when we just do a passive stretch. So if I put my leg right here and I'm just passively stretching, there's no neurological stimulation here to create neurological control over my body. And the other thing we know about human biology So when we're talking about strength training, essentially what we're doing is we're creating a biological adaptation in our tissue, and therefore we become stronger. But how do we create a biological adaptation? Well, we need stress, we need force on our tissues, and then your tissues will respond to the stress or the force. It will create an adaptation so it becomes stronger, and then we adapt and we become stronger. In a passive stretch, there is no stress, there is no force, there is no stimulation. We're just kind of hanging out there passively. So we're not stressing the lines of tissue. We're not activating the nervous system to create strength and control. So we're just opening up more range of motion neurologically, but we don't have strength and control here. And that's the downside of passive flexibility. In isolation, flexibility training is not a good thing. We want to combine flexibility and mobility training together to get true health and true longevity, and building that control within our own body.
Amir, what does the research say in terms of sustained joint health? Because, for example, there is a certain type of yoga which we are questioning whether or not it's effective for hypermobile people, and it's known as a style called yin. And it's basically, different people teach it in different ways. Some people say, you go to end range flexibility and you hang out. Other people say there should be a measure of activation there, but you're there for a really long time, 5, sometimes 10 minutes. So I don't know from a physio perspective myself, if actually we are able to sustain an end range contraction at such a long period of time. I think personally, especially hypermobile people, will probably fatigue way before that. However, what some of the kind of reasons people say it's important to continue practicing this form of yoga is because, and just to clarify, I'm not sure if I totally believe in this, but I'm just trying to cast some light on what people are saying. They're saying that your ligaments have to have a certain degree of stimulation so that into old age, they remain supple and they remain healthy instead of drying out. Now, when I heard that, I was like, I need to see the research on this because it just doesn't sound robust enough for me. It sounds a little bit wishy-washy. And I've yet to get those people to send me research about it. But I think because you've gone through FRC training and you've probably had a bit more exposure to what joint health really looks like into old age, what is the research saying that you've come across?
I mean, and this is where it becomes very independent on specific individuals. But if we're like, when they're doing that 5 to 10 minute hold, what are they exactly doing? Are they just hanging out there, or are they actively working? What exactly are they doing there?
Well, this is the thing. Different teachers in yin teach different things. Some people say that it's just a relaxation. You need to surrender because then it has some kind of psychological impact on you. And I mean, people do report that their minds do go through some powerful change, which is profoundly positive. However, other teachers are saying that you have to sustain some level of contraction, but you're holding the poses for up to 10 minutes. And in my mind, if you're at end range with a surrender and activation, I don't know if the two are possible together.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in that position and you're able to hold that contraction for 5 to 10 minutes, you would not be working hard enough to do strength training. And that's what we're trying to do when we're doing mobility. We're trying to get into a position where it's so neurologically demanding that when you try to stimulate these areas, your contractions are probably going to only last 15 or 20 seconds, because that's going to be highly neurologically demanding strength training that we need to become stronger and to create that biological adaptation for strength. So if they're hanging out for 5 to 10 minutes, unfortunately, all you're doing is continuing to open up passive flexibility. And that's the last thing hypermobile people want to do, is continue to open up more passive flexibility. Now, I have certain clients who don't have any flexibility, and flexibility is a prerequisite to mobility training. So we have to open up some type of neurological range of motion and then strengthen it. So for my clients who have no flexibility, I make them hold stretches for 2 to 5 minutes, no problem, passively. And then we actively work highly neurologically demanding strength training concepts to strengthen those ranges of motion. By the sounds of it, they're not really utilizing the correct type of concepts to get the type of outcome that they want. If you want to strengthen the tendons or the ligaments, the connective tissues, all those tissues, we need far more stimulus. We need far more stress and force. And to be able to apply that force, you're not going to be able to do it much longer than 15, 20 seconds if you're really putting out the output that is required to build strength. So I don't really like that the concept that I'm kind of hearing from that side at all, especially for hypermobile people. Now, kind of going back to that mental thing that you were kind of talking about, that's the one beautiful thing that I'll say about yoga principles. We do get a lot of parasympathetic tone in our nervous system, and that's an amazing thing. But that's not exclusive to just yoga training. It's just what happens to our minds when we're doing something like yoga. We're so calm, we're so focused on our body, on our mind, on our soul, on our breath. We're very interconnected with ourselves, and that's a beautiful thing. But I can do that through meditation. I can do that by going outside and walking and being very conscious and aware. There's many different ways to achieve this parasympathetic tone in our nervous system without the detriments of creating hyperflexibility within my own body. So I get that element of it, but I wouldn't exactly destroy the structure of my tissues to be able to get that parasympathetic tone for my nervous system.
Okay. Just for the guys at home, if you don't know what parasympathetic is, you have two branches in your nervous system. One is your fight or flight, known as sympathetic. What Amir is referring to is your parasympathetic, which is your rest and repair and more chilled out zone. That we
exactly. Totally.
I feel like we've kind of touched on everything like from all the questions that we sent.
I have.
Okay, go for it.
Amir, can you give us some physical examples on the camera right now of the kind of thing that you feel if hypermobile people did this, it would actually be really beneficial for them? Some kind of little takeaways that maybe they could start implementing from today after they've watched this video.
Totally. And I think the main thing we need to understand is concepts. And one of my favorite concepts for hypermobile people is something called controlled articular rotations. This is a concept that's presented at FRC, the functional range conditioning. So essentially what we do is we get into different base positions and we single out one joint that we're trying to improve. And then we're going to take the joint to its greatest ranges of motion possible, always within pain-free ranges of motion, but we do this actively. There's no passive element in it whatsoever. So let me set up the camera and I can kind of show what something could look like. So let's say we're doing one for the hip. Set my camera down. Okay. Okay. Am I completely in the screen?
Yeah, you look great.
So yeah, it's like a model pose, like, hey. So controlled articular rotation. So the very first step in controlled articular rotations is something that we call irradiation. So it's essentially utilizing your nervous system to create stress and create force. Now, why do we do this? Well, in a lot of mobility drills that we do, there's not exactly an external stimulus like a dumbbell or a barbell or something like that. So we have to be able to provide stress to our connective tissues because we're trying to create a biological adaptation for strength. The other benefit of utilizing your nervous system to engage is that we're now going to start developing neurological control over our joints when we're going through movements. So in our joint capsules, at every level, there's these things called mechanoreceptors. These are responsible for communicating to your neurology when your body goes in space. So if we stimulate the mechanoreceptors at a capsular level, and then we try to express movements, you're going to have more control over your body. More control over your body is a very good thing. So that's why we practice irradiation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a hip cars. So I'm going to single out my right hip. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating tension in my body, let's say at about 30% of my maximum ability. So I'm going to start contracting every muscle in my body, utilize my nervous system to create stress. Now I'm going to take this top leg, and the whole movement's very slow, it's very controlled, and it's very active. So I'm going to slowly start driving my knee up as high as I can. Only the hip is going to move, no other compensations through the rest of my body, so don't collapse your spine. Drive that knee up as high as you can. Now go into abduction, divorcing the hips away from each other. Once you can't go any wider, you're going to go into internal rotation of that hip, driving your heel back towards your upper body, squeezing out all the rotation possible in that hip capsule. Now we're going to go into hip extension, driving my hip back, squeezing my hamstrings, and seeing how far I can go backwards without compensating through my lower back. Then I bring the knee forward, and I'm going to reverse. Hip extension, donkey kick back, external rotation of my hip. Stay out wide, drive that knee up as high as you can. Bring this knee down nice and slow, and then back out. So this is something that we do very slow controlled. We're always utilizing our nervous system. We're never going into an area that creates pain. And then we're going to do a few repetitions, maybe 2 to 4 reps, really keeping engaged the whole time.
And this is to create, just to reinforce the message in case anyone missed it, because I think Amir said it so beautifully. He said this is to reinforce the biological adaptation that's going to go on in your tissues. So one of the issues that we face is like reduced collagen, but movements like this actually stimulates getting collagen production. Am I right?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the way we got to look at it too is that we always have this idea of individuality between the tissue structures. The muscle attaches to the tendon to the bone into this.
Yeah, but
in human biology, if you look at it through a microscope, it's a clusterfuck of tissues that are wrapped around each other. So if we're stressing lines of tissue, collagen, fascia, muscle, tendon, ligaments, all of them get stimulated and all of them become stronger.
The blood,
so absolutely.
Nerves, everything is getting more input and everything is changing depending on what you're doing, whether that's nothing or something.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Exactly.
And so, just to clarify, the irradiation you talk about, is this like that kind of movement as if you're like moving through mud? So like, you know, I could move my arm like this, like la la la, or I could move it like intensifying like everything, like I'm maybe not even moving through mud, moving through like cement that's about to dry. Like really engaging all of my muscles, like. And this is like in yoga. So for those of you watching, you know, maybe you've been to a yoga class where you're like hanging out in your warrior two and your arm is like this, and the yoga teacher comes along and like, you know, reminds you to extend all the way out through your fingertips.
Yep.
Right. That's what you're talking about when you mention irradiation.
That's exactly right. And sometimes I tell my clients, like, imagine like someone just poured like a bunch of honey on you, or like you use like mud or cement. And just we're trying to take rather simple movements and we're trying to make them harder, utilize your own nervous system to create this tension, to create the stress for our tissues, and to stimulate neurological control over our body. So you said it perfectly right there. Imagine like someone dumped a bunch of mud on you, and now we're trying to express these ranges of motion, fighting through tension. And sometimes what I do for some of my clients, let's say for like an elbow one, I'm going to make him fight my resistance. And I'm going to say, once I let go of my hand, match the resistance that you feel utilizing your own nervous system now.
Yeah. I think this concept can be so helpful for hypermobile people, because the way that we move, we're so used to being able to just put our bodies in whatever shape we want, and we just like kind of fling and flop ourselves around. And so changing just that, just like if nothing else, I think just thinking about moving everywhere as if you're moving through that like almost dry cement, so all of your muscles are active and engaged, then you're basically doing all of this kind of conditioning in a way, right?
Amir,
absolutely.
I mean, in the yoga world, it's almost a dirty word to say that you go to the gym and lift weights. And however, I do appreciate obviously your experience being on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's almost what yogis inherently fear. But there is people feel that body weight training is definitely far superior than any kind of lifting. And I would love to just hear your perception on that, especially with the demographic of hypermobile people.
Absolutely. And the main thing that we need to understand, that anything in life, especially this topic in specific, like it's not black or white. It's not weight training makes you all stiff and rigid. And it's not yoga just makes you hypermobile. We need to understand there's many layers, and we can incorporate certain principles together to create the full package. So if I'm doing a lot of joint specific mobility training and my joints now have rotational integrity, they have strength and control over ranges of motion, and then I apply weight training concepts, no longer am I jeopardizing my movement quality or my mobility, because I've solidified that base, and I'm going to continue to do my mobility training with my weight training. I think the first thing, and hypermobility is the term that's always used, and the way I look at it is the term really should be hyperflexibility. Because if we think about mobility and what mobility truly is, it's strength training. It's being strong in these extended ranges of motion. So if you have strength and control in a range of motion, you can't ever have too much mobility. So hypermobility, it's a tricky term, because really what we're trying to say is someone's hyper flexible. And it's absolutely important to be able to strengthen bone density and be able to strengthen musculature as well through weight training. And then I got to do my joint specific type stuff as well to create my mobility and create joint strength training as well. And then I want to also do stuff that's good for my parasympathetic tone, for my nervous system as well, that kind of down regulates all the stress that I'm providing. And that's the nice thing about yoga, kind of like what I was saying. So if I utilize all those type of things, now I'm creating the full package. But if we're just going all in on just yoga in itself, that's not enough. If we go all in on just weight training in itself, it's not enough. We have to understand it's not black and white, and there's so many layers to all of this stuff. There's so many layers to our biology. It's not that simple. It's rather complex. So we need to understand the bigger picture.
Absolutely. So good. I could just listen to you talk all day long. Just talk at me. Is there anything else that you want to?
No, I think it would be great if people know like where they can find you, where they can like maybe learn a little bit more about you. So
Any
that,
resources
yeah.
you can recommend?
Oh, and yeah, if you have any resources, any information that you've come across about hypermobility, even, you know, aside from movement, you know, just going into, I don't know, like the collagen, or I don't know if, I might be like putting you on the spot about something that is not your area at all, but do you know anything about dietary, like things that people can add to their diets for hypermobility? Like, and we've had questions about collagen and bone broth and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, the one thing I would always urge is to look at it as a part of the puzzle. If we're just going through supplements or nutrition in itself, it's not enough to kind of to build that strength and control within your own body. It always has to be that active approach. But one of the main things that we do need to present in our nutritional foundation is more meat. It's more of that protein, and it's so true. And it's more important that we get more of the fatty cuts of meat. And something that I always go to is stuff like ribeye steaks. And I know there's like this big thing about red meat is bad for us and it's bad for the environment. And one thing that I always do is I outsource like really good quality farms, like environmentally friendly farms who do things correctly, ethical and moral. It's all organic, it's all grass-fed, it's high quality meat. Now, when we get high quality meat, this is one of the best things that we can do for our body. If you think about like a ribeye and all the fatty tissue in it, that is connective tissue in the ribeye steak. When I'm doing these type of training and I want to repair my own connective tissue, one of the best things I can do is eat this type of meat that has all this nutrients and has all this connective tissue. This is going to help me grow and rebuild what I'm doing to my own body and make me stronger as well. So I think that's one big thing that we can start incorporating more in our diet. And I think some demographics are definitely a little bit more hesitant to incorporate it.
Yeah, in the yoga world, saying like you should eat more meat,
yeah, that's quite sacrilegious.
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be a lot of people that go, oh, no, about that. Yeah. But I mean,
but we understand,
yeah,
you know,
totally,
yeah, because we have to remember that within the yoga tradition, it's all like looking at animals as our friend, and they're like, we don't want to eat our friends. So I totally get it.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, people have to just decide what them and what their bodies need. But I think if you do feel like something's missing, it's really important to go and see a nutritionist who, if you are on a special type of diet, can help you fill in the gaps. So that, for example, the things that Amir is mentioning, you know, is there a way that you can find that nutritional source that can help support you in some way if maybe you're not eating meat, which is totally cool.
Yeah, and absolutely, and there's so many like moral reasons that I hear, and it's completely honorable and commendable. And it's hard though, because we are getting to a point that we might be malnourished and we might not be getting the vitamins and nutrients that we need. And it's a tricky situation for sure. But I'd say, like you said, it brings up a good idea. Maybe go see a professional and see if there's little things that you can start incorporating and kind of get some of the things that you're missing out on. But always keep in mind that no matter what you're getting through just nutrition alone, if you're not doing these active type movements, you're never going to be able to create the strength and control that your body needs. So that's going to be number one priority, 100%. And then we want to start looking towards the nutrition and seeing how we can continue to get more optimal.
It's definitely a full package approach, that holistic understanding of your body, what it needs. And then you can start layering on top of that, you know, but like that's such a like absolute, like looking at all the different pieces of the puzzle and really understanding what works for you and then moving on from that. Amir, it's such a pleasure talking to you. Is there any kind of resources around this topic, especially around strength training, hypermobility, or anything that you just think, you know, I read this one book once and it just changed my life? Is there anything you want to share with the listeners?
Totally. And for me, like my biggest light bulb moment through like years in school and everything I did was actually, it was about 18 months ago when I went to functional range conditioning, and the information that's provided there, it really like a switch turned on that day, and everything made so much more sense. And it was so deep in understanding on human biology, and they made complex ideas and concepts very simple. They made it very simple to understand, and nothing through my years of schooling or anything through any kind of accredited certification or anything that I did outside of that never presented this type of information. So for anyone out there, and I always give this recommendation to everyone, is if you have the opportunity to learn from these type of instructors from that course, 100% go there. It's worth the money. Everyone's like, oh, but it's $900. I'm like, honestly, the amount of information and education I've learned from them, I owe them so much more, because I've completely turned my life around. Like I said, like my body used to be broken. I used to be in a really dark place mentally as well. Like it sucked having a body that couldn't do what I wanted to do. And I felt like my longevity was compromised, and I was always hurt. And that creates more inflammation in your body, and that creates more negativity in your mind. So $900 for what I have now, that's nothing. Like I owe like 10,000, 20,000. I owe so much more money to the level of instructors and the people that have helped me. Like my life is like, I'm so blessed. I'm so grateful. And it's such a beautiful place now, where 3 years ago was so dark and it didn't really seem like there was any positivity for me. So I'd say go to FRC, learn from really amazing professionals, and then implement the work. And once you see the progress, you're going to fall in love with it, and it's going to make sense. So I'd say go take up something like that, and you won't regret it.
You've inspired me, because I did like this rabbit hole on YouTube, and I watched like, I don't know, like 20 hours worth of content on FRC. And every single workshop I ever teach now, whether anywhere in the world, I'm always like FRC. I just really appreciate it. But you've inspired me, and I really should do the course, because the stuff that I saw on YouTube actually did change my life completely as well. And completely changed how I teach yoga.
Yeah, there you go. So if you're not quite sure about taking the course,
here we go. We
start with some YouTube.
Yeah.
And what I will say to anyone that's taking the course, like you definitely have to go in with a very open mind, because they're very passionate and they have some strong beliefs. And I know that when I was there that first day, I had to eat a lot of humble pie. I had to reflect back on certain things that I was doing as a younger trainer. And I had to be like, you know what? Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I looked at it incorrectly. Maybe I didn't have the right perspective. And the type of people that these guys are, like, they genuinely care about helping people, but they do come off rather strong. And I feel like I've kind of turned into that a little bit. I might be coming off a little strong, but I'm so passionate about it. And I see the type of change that's possible. And then I see where the fitness industry is, and I'm like, oh, fuck, I know what's wrong, because I was there 3 years ago. I fucked my body up so bad, and I know why now. Mm-hmm. And when I see people doing it, I feel like I have this urge to like share this message and like get it out there. Like, this is what we need to do, and this is how we can look at it to get our health back and to kind of fulfill our potential. Because I feel like we're not even scratching the surface. There's so much more for all of us. It's kind of crazy, and it's beautiful what the human body can achieve with the right type of inputs. And it's kind of scary what it can achieve with the wrong type of inputs as well.
100%, Amir. Thank you so much for all your valuable insights and sharing that information. Where can people find out more about you? How can they follow you and learn more from you?
Yeah, so I mean, the only place really is Instagram. My handle is Beard the Best You Can Be. That's yeah, Beard the Best. But yeah, I mean, I have a YouTube.
Beard, though. Yeah, you have got the best beard.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. That's pretty much where everyone can find me. I do have a YouTube channel, but I only post like 2 videos, same name. But yeah, find me on Instagram. If you have any questions, feel free to ask away. And if you're looking for practitioners around you, I definitely have like a nice little network, and I always love to refer out and get people in the right hands. So feel free to reach out to me if you want.
Yeah, I'd love to have any of your recommendations for London if you have.
I want to come out there. I definitely want to come out there and like do like a workshop.
Yeah, you've got to.
Yeah. Oh, I'd love to come hang out with you guys, get like a training session in and have some fun.
That would be awesome.
Definitely.
So.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. Amir, you're amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.